Hello. Hi there. Great. Hello there. Brilliant. So we're just going to wait a couple more minutes while the attendees just join us. Great. Okay, looks like we've got a full house. Welcome, everybody. So my name's Lucinda Carney. I am a psychologist, but actually my background is 20 odd years in OD, learning development, HR. And one of the things that I'm passionate about is working with our clients now through the Business Actus, helping them to enable change, helping them to deliver business value. And one of the challenges that comes up time and time again is being taken seriously, HR getting that foot at the table, the top table, so you can get the investment and the understanding of the business and be taken seriously. And part of this, I think, is our ability to be seen as being strategic. It's about talking business language. And the purpose of this webinar is to help us to do that, a bit more of that. Because the complaint often is from the business that we are not always, say, commercial enough, perhaps. Perhaps we don't demonstrate business impact to a sufficient degree. Perhaps we don't get taken seriously because we're not talking to the right people. So for us, it's how can we remove some of those blockers so that we can add more value to the business that we work for or organisation. It's about being an HR change agent. And this webinar, I'm going to keep it short and sweet, probably about 20 minutes, because I know most of us are busy. The purpose of this is to help us identify how we can be more strategic, helps us look at some steps to developing an OD strategy. I'm going to take you through an OD case study and also a balanced scorecard example. Feel free to ask questions through the chat. People are muted at the moment because obviously there's too many of you out there, but I can answer questions and I'd love to have some questions, so I know there's people there. Thank you, Helen. Great. In fact, anyone else who wants to say hi and say where you're from, it'd be great to hear from you. I see some names coming up. Oh, brilliant. A question. All right. Yes. Okay. So what's the difference between HR, OD, L&D? I think that's a great question because I have used them interchangeably here. Now, obviously, I'm sure most of us know HR, human resources, encompasses a whole range of things, and very often learning and development and organisational development, if you have it, would fit into it. I would pose an alternative view sometimes. I believe that organisational development could almost sit and be overarching, because to me, OD is about taking the business in the right direction or organisation in the right direction. You can do that through human resources. You can do that through learning and development. In reality, I don't think it matters too much. I think the purpose really is of us working collaboratively, and it's about the people aspects, people and cultural aspects of an organisation, and harnessing that to deliver results. And that's the angle that we're going to be coming from today. So why do we want to look at things in that way? Well, we looked at some of the research. If some of you may have come across the Towards Maturity CIPD research, was out, I think it was 2017. 85% of learning and development leaders want to improve business performance, and that would be pretty consistent for people in HR. It just happened to be we looked at the L&D conference last year. 61% though say that their activities align to the strategic goals of the business. I think that's interesting because more of them want to do it. Why aren't they aligned? Now, one of the reasons may well be is that many businesses, we find this because we obviously work in performance management, many businesses don't have strategic goals. They may be in the CEO's head, but they haven't refined them or qualified them. And maybe one of the first things we should be doing as HR change agents is helping the business that we work for get clarity about where it's going, about the 1, 3, 5 year plan, and identifying some goals, some aims. They don't even have to be hugely smart at that level, but if you're running any kind of performance management, and objectives are key for people having focus and performing, if we don't know where the business is going or where the business priorities are, it's really hard for people to know A, they're contributing, and to make sure that the business is aligned. So I'd argue that's one of the reasons. And then only 36% of L&D have got a plan for agreeing those business metrics or for meeting those. And this is where I can see there's a disconnect between L&D, OD, HR and the business, because we're not actually demonstrating how our interventions are going to drive the business forward. And this is where we get seen as fluffy. And when we go to the FDs for some finance, it's just not going to happen. Even fewer of us are measuring agreed business KPIs as part of our evaluation. So the purpose of this is to think about how we can do that. It's all very well and saying, you know, we should do it, we're going to look at how we can do it. So I'm going to look at building an L&D strategy, which I've got a slide here on. I'm going to look at an OD strategy on a page, and I'm going to look at a balanced scorecard, which could help. So here we've got very high level 5 steps to building an L&D strategy. And if you want more detail on any of these, you can download this resource. We've got a white paper on our actus.co.uk within our resources. But simple 5 steps. The point at the start is actually we need to understand the key drivers and challenges as seen by the senior team. That means you've got to get to know them. If you haven't got a seat around the table, how can you get a seat at the first line meetings? How can you get one-to-one meetings with people, all of the senior team, to understand what keeps them awake at night? You need to understand their challenges on a regular basis and their goals and objectives. Now, ideally, help them put those goals and objectives into something that the whole company can see. But from your point of view, or what our point of view is, we need to see these challenges. So it could be we're not selling enough widgets, and we need to work out why that is in terms of people stuff. So it might be people-related systems, and it might be people-related capabilities. Are we not selling enough widgets because we don't have the sales skills? Are we not selling enough widgets because we're building the wrong kinds of widgets because we don't understand the marketplace? Are we not delivering enough widgets because our staff are not skilled or capable enough, or their working patterns, their resourcing pattern isn't supporting it? So we need to think about those potential links to people-related systems and capabilities, and help the senior board team see how that's going to link with the overall driver. Then, of course, once you've seen the links, we need to work out what the solutions are. So is it training? Is it new systems? Is it new rostering? Think about the people-related solutions or enablers that we can put in place, and it's going to be multiple. With people's stuff, it isn't binary, it's not one way, so you need to have a variety of measures which are going to nudge things in the right way. Now, point 4 for me is a bit of a personal passion. I'm very keen on a strategy on a page, a one-pager that you can gain buy-in. Strategy, it doesn't need to be a 20-page document. In fact, I'd argue it isn't a 20-page document. A strategy is an overall direction. And what you need to do is help people see that direction and gain buy-in. You gain buy-in from your senior leaders. They know why you're doing what you're doing, and they will then support it. As they will support you, and then you will be able to support them by delivering value. All too often, because these senior leaders don't see the connection, they either will pull funding, or they won't send people on your training courses. They won't support your training courses. You put these beautiful things in place. They don't get it. You don't actually get the value out of it. So you've got to make sure you've got that buy-in. And to really be credible, you need to implement measures. So you gain the buy-in for the funding, let's say in the first place, by your strategy and the people to send people on your courses, etc. But then you've got to actually measure these progress and refine and improve and report back tangibly to the business. So let's have a think about what an OD strategy on a page could be. And this is taken from a real example that I worked with. So this particular client was suffering against the competition. They were losing people and sales to the competition because fundamentally they had old technology, and they had people in the business that only understood the old technology. They didn't understand the new technology. Therefore, people were also leaving. So they were selling less and they were losing key skills. It was a real problem. Well, how could that link into a solution that's people-oriented? This was part of the solution. So first of all, they realised that people had never really been given clear expectations about the skills and knowledge they needed to gain over time. They had a number of, let's say, ageing engineers who had been able to coast on historic products which were going out of favour. And no one had told them, actually, the expectation was for them to keep those skills updated, and also to build other processes in terms of bringing in new skills, whether it's apprenticeship programs, graduate recruitment programs, or training programs, which was going to improve the skill mix in the business. Now, that links into performance management, not just from a training point of view, which I'll come back to, but it was also about people having clear goals and objectives about the sort of skills they should be doing and the sort of performance they should be delivering to their customers. They might be comfort zoning in terms of their support. The maintenance guys were spending more time with the existing customers than the newer customers because they were comfortable of this. So the performance management process needed to make sure the objectives were aligning with the solution to that business issue, which might have been about increasing numbers of maintenance visits to the new customers. It was about increasing skills in the new skills and challenging people to take those on. So the performance management needed to be linked to that, and this was something again where it was moving from an annual performance management move to a quarterly because it was a very fast moving marketplace. And so it was important to ensure that people had up-to-date, relevant objectives at the right time. Apologies, I've just gone backwards. Next stage was about aligning skills and L&D solutions, if you like, alongside it. In fact, this is more OD because it's quite mixed. So prior to that point, performance management had been paper-based, quality of objectives were questionable. So they did need to put in a people management program, and part of that was expectations for people managers as to what good people management looked like, moving from a once-a-year appraisal, if you're lucky, to quarterly meaningful conversations and updated objectives. People needed educating in that and training, and that needed to be embedded. And then there were a host of other skills that were also added in, and I'm going to go through those one at a time. So access to coaching and mentoring. It was clear that sort of traditional training wasn't the only way forward, and so they put in access to coaching and mentoring throughout the business. Now, executive coaching can be really expensive, so they had different models for different levels of the business, but moving to much more of a coaching culture as opposed to a more sort of autocratic culture that had been in there in the past. They also had to invest in enabling technologies. So by that, I'm talking about sort of social interaction technologies, communication technologies, a whole range of learning resources. So that would have been updating the LMS, but also video snippets, lunch learns, breakfast briefings, lots of different ways in which people were able to learn, as well as sort of quick FAQs and things. Social learning opportunities was really quite early because this example is going back 10 years or so. This was things like breakfast briefings. Collaboration technology was relatively new, but doing sort of shared webinars where people were getting to share and learn from each other. And sort of online, if you went through a training program, action learning sets was project work, which was really powerful, people learning from each other. And then at the top here, really, although it's at the right-hand side, what was essential was to link this all together into career skills and paths, because prior to this point, actually the individuals in question, let's say they might have been reaching retirement, a lot of them, why would they want to go to the effort of learning new skills? Well, this was about setting out professional skill paths. It might be that you could move from being a senior engineer up to being an executive or consultant engineer or project manager, and that would give you not only additional skills, but maybe additional reward or status. So they defined specialist career paths with specific skills that helped give people the why, the aspiration as to why they should take on these new skills, motivated them. There was something in it for them. So all of those together, there's quite a lot of work there that we're summarising in one page, but all of those things work synergistically together to drive much more of an empowered learning culture. It wasn't just being driven by L&D, it was people taking ownership internally and then deciding what they needed to learn on. And the output, of course, which is what it's all about, and linking back to the business, was increased skill and capability and engagement and retention. Now, of course, both of those are measurable. So you could measure how many people were able to implement Cisco kit versus BT kits in this particular example. You could measure how many people had specific qualifications, Microsoft qualifications or PMP qualifications. You could also measure how engaged people were and your attrition rate. And they cost money, particularly attrition. You can put an absolutely specific value on that for everyone you have to recruit. So that helps give you a return on investment. So this strategy is a great way in which, if you can get people to buy into this, when you're going to your FD saying, I need investment in enabling technologies, in training courses, they need to see this link, and potentially you need to think, well, what kind of value could that return? If we were able to reduce our attrition rate from its current 16% down to 12%, what is that in real terms? And if I was to spend that on L&D interventions, you'd almost certainly be able to find you've got a justification. So hopefully that just gives you a snapshot of an OD strategy on a page. If any of you got any questions, I realise I've gone through that quite quickly, do feel free to enter them in the chat button. In fact, I've got one coming up now. Yeah. Okay, so the question is about coaching and mentoring, and actually that's a really valid question because, yeah, executive coaching, that can blow your budget straight away. It's really expensive, isn't it? And it's only a very small number of people who can do it. And actually, this was quite an innovative way in which this organisation ran their coaching and mentoring, and it worked really well. So what they did was they actually invested in training up people who were mid to senior managers who had an interest in people, giving them coaching skills. And what they did is but they gave them the coaching skills, but they also then set up almost a formalized coaching program internally. And by formalized, what they'd done in the past, you'd found, because they did some investigation into why problems had existed before, and you'd found that there were some fabulous coaches and mentors in the business. But the problem was they were all oversubscribed because they never ever lost their coachee. They'd get that buddy, they're new in, some lucky people were still having the FD years and years later as their personal coach. But that didn't allow fresh blood to get access to these people. You're always going to have a special relationship, but it wasn't really fair. These people then were at capacity and you run out. So it was run like a formal coaching program where an external consultant, as it was, actually managed it. And if people signed up to be a coach, then they would sign up with their coachee for 3 to 6 sessions. This would be reported on back to the external coach. They'd go through formal contracting. And then once you got the end of those sessions, then the coach is freed up. Or the mentor, whichever it was kind of interchangeable, was freed up to either take someone else on or take a break. You'd still have a relationship, but you'd been through that coaching program. So by managing it in that finite way, you were able to get far more people access to those skills. And it also felt like less of an imposition on those people who are offering their time. That's great. I've got another question here about enabling technologies. I can't remember the name of it, and I think actually it would have been out of date. I mean, there's so much now in terms of social technologies that you can use. I can't remember what the technologies were, but it was collaboration technologies. I will give you an example, though, of how it worked really well in one of our clients. So whether it's enabling technology or whether it's social learning, one of our clients, I think it was called Yammer, but it's something else now. They actually do the wind turbines, and you'd have these engineers, I don't know, 40 meters off the ground in a wind turbine needing to fix something, and they wouldn't know the answer to it. Now, they'd all got iPads with them, and they found that they started to use this social network where they could go in, they could post a question, and a colleague would literally be able to give the answer, or they could look on a stream within 5 or 10 minutes. And so that was a really, really powerful way in which they were able to improve performance in terms of solving and fixing things more quickly, but also learning from each other and maybe not feeling quite so lonely and disconnected. So technology can be brilliant for those remote workers. That was really, really powerful. Any other questions? How did you get them? Okay, so the question here is, was the buy-in from the people managers? Varies, I think I'd say the question is. One of the things that really helped, though, in terms of driving this from the people managers was helping them understand why. As I said earlier, I'm a great believer in explaining to people when they see that what we're trying to do is we're trying to stop you from losing people from your team, retain people, then that makes huge amounts of difference to them, because actually it's a pain, isn't it, recruiting people? So helping them understand the why was useful. The other thing which was helpful was actually setting the managers' people management objectives. So by moving from once a year appraisal to ongoing quarterly check-ins, they actually had that set within their performance objectives. So it was made very clear that it was an expectation. I think that was really powerful. I'll just take one more question. It's been on the slide for a while. Okay, so the question here is about how long does it take? Well, do you know what? I don't know if they ever fully got there. This is a journey, but certainly to implement all of those things, a fair amount of resource over 12 to 24 months, and then to start getting value from it, you were probably talking 3 years on, really. So it's not overnight, and that's the thing, people have to realize that. So you need to pick up longer term strategies to make a difference, and you have to be persistent and consistent, and that's why you must get the buy-in from the business and commitment to you being able to see things through. It's very frustrating if you start something that you believe is going to make a difference and then get the funding pulled, and that's why if they understand, if you've got that strategic buy-in, it's much less likely to happen. Okay, and then let's go to this area here about, we've got our strategy, but if we're going to be credible, we've got to make it measurable. And one of the ways you can do this is think about the business balance scorecard. Many of you will have come across the balance scorecard, and I've escaped me who it's from, which is about looking at how you measure success in terms of finance, customer, process, and learning and growth, organisational capacity. The reason for this is that at the time, so forgive me, I can't remember who the balance scorecard came from, someone will tell me. But you found that lots of businesses were just being measured on the financials. But the reality is the financials are only measuring what you did last year. It's your customer metrics, your process metrics, and your sort of internal metrics, which are driving next year's results. And this is why it is all about balance. So yes, in L&D, how can we measure our financial impact? Absolutely. How much are we spending on training today? But equally, how can we measure the impact of it on our key customers, internal and external? How satisfied are they? Is it sufficient to have happy sheets? Very few people would say that now. Kirkpatrick's model of how do you measure impact then? So how can we measure the impact of our spend? Consider our processes. What are our repeatable processes? How can we make them more effective? And how are we future-proofing and aligning things with future and business needs? So these are great questions to ask ourselves. And then what we need to do is think about what the right metrics would be that would enable us to measure value. So you can look at just change in L&D spend. Let's say you've got £500,000 a year learning and development budget, and you decide you want to spend it in a different way. That's all been spent on classroom training previously, but actually what you want to do is change that so that it's going to be spent, half of it's on social learning or digital learning. So you might see that change in spend. What you then need to do is, well, how is that improving the value? I mean, maybe you could improve spend. I've got an example. When I took over an L&D department many moons ago, they were spending £1 million-ish on development, on training people. They had a massive training school. Now, but they weren't really getting the value out of it. And when I looked at it, they were running courses with 3 people on them. And actually, in order to break even, because they also had customers on it, they were hardly breaking even. They were kind of making a loss. So it was really a case of thinking, well, let's only run courses when you've got a minimum of 6 people on it. That halved our spend for the same impact overnight. Now, I say overnight because it took a time to do it. We had to put in processes in order to do that, like ensuring that you had cancellation processes, so getting people booked on earlier, and about tracking and booking things up, communicating waiting lists and spaces on courses earlier. So things like that. But it's all common sense. But it's surprising how often these sort of things, you could easily make a difference there. Think about how you spend things, your impact. You're able to get to more people by investing in videos or webinars or e-learning. Not everybody loves e-learning, but there's other digital content that you can use too. What's your uptake? How many people are taking these on? And what is your spread in terms of the value? And what's the engagement scores? Now, I'm not just talking about employee engagement, as in what is their engagement with the learning? What's the average quantity of learning that people are taking part in? I mentioned processes already, measuring compliance, tracking how many people have completed things. So what are your processes? Are they supporting things? How quickly can you deliver against your training requirements? So that's quite an interesting one. So going back 15 years, we had a paper-based or an Excel-based performance management approach. I had no way of seeing what the training needs were real time. So actually, I calculated it took probably 12 to 18 months for me to be able to put on a training program in response to a training need that someone might have had a year ago. Now we've got things where you've got real-time information. You could potentially turn around a training need in 6 to 8 weeks, which means you are upskilling that person faster. And as long as those training needs are linked to genuine business requirement, so their managers are doing their job, then you're going to make a massive difference in terms of upskilling people faster, helping them to be successful, which may well decrease attrition anyway, but you're going to drive the business forward too. And then you can look at other measures. So, as long as you know what the skills are you need, can you measure people's skill or competence and set a target on increasing it? So let's say we've got here 78% of engineers with XYZ qualification, and we want that to be 92% by next year. You can also look at things like 360 feedback. You can run that at the start and end of a training program, and you can see whether or not people's skills have developed. So there's lots of examples here in which you can get quite quantifiable about your value add. And as long as you've got the business to agree that these are relevant to the strategy that you're driving, then they should be seen as a relevant value add back to the business. Okay, so I promised to keep this brief, so I'm going to wrap up there. Any other questions, I'll stay on the line for a little bit longer for anyone who wants to talk to me, and I'll put my contact details up. But hopefully this was the sort of session you were after. If you want to talk to us using the hashtag #HRChangeAgent. We're on LinkedIn and Twitter using that hashtag. And you can also contact me directly if you've got any comments or questions. That's my email address and LinkedIn, Twitter. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up there. Thanks so much, everybody. We are really grateful to have you on this webinar. Keep an eye on our page. We will be doing webinars every 4 to 6 weeks. We've got topics on HR Change Agent coming up. We've got one financial services on culture change with SMCR. And there's another one which is coming up, which is about actually embedding L&D within an ongoing performance management cycle. So, and if you have topics you want us to talk about, please mail us, mention it to us. We're happy to get involved and really would welcome your suggestions as to what's useful. Thanks so much for your time.